Today we are going to do a head-to-head of 3 great retro reissue divers. I'm Chris, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to do a head-to-head of 3 retro reissue divers that I've recently reviewed on this channel. We have a candidate from the USA, which is the Laurier. We have a candidate from Great Britain, which is the Geckota, and we also have one from France, which is the Wolbrook Diver. So why am I doing this? Well, I think all 3 watches offer incredible value for money and good bang for your buck. Honestly, I think you'd be happy with any of these 3 watches today, but since I've bought all 3 and reviewed all 3, I'm really interested into diving into this in a more detailed way to see which one I think will offer you the best value for money for under £500. Now, the way this is going to be structured is through 16 categories. The top score that you can get is 3, the lowest score being 1, as you have 1, 2, 3 different watches. Obviously, for the USA, you have Laurier. For Great Old Blighty, you got the Geckota Deep Sea Hunter dive watch, and for France you've got the Wolbrook retro reissue diver that they've got. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the maximum amount of points on offer today is 48. Let's get started with the first category, which is price. So as you can see, the Wolbrook comes in at top price with $489. By the way, I've converted all of these amounts to dollars just so it's nice and clean. In second place is the Laurier at $499, so not a lot of difference. And then bringing up the rear in this category is the Geckota at $633 or 499 UK pounds. Now, as we know, price isn't everything, but it is certainly an important part of a buying process. And when there is such a gulf between the cheapest watch, which is the Wolbrook, and Geckota, which is the most expensive watch, you expect there to be some additional features. But this is a fairly simple category to begin with. We're just looking at price. So if you are on a budget, then Wolbrook is going to be the one for you. If you have a little bit more money to spend, then you can have a look at all 3. But should you just do that? Well, let's have a look at the next category, which is movement. So the Laurier comes in number 1 this time with 3 points. Number 2 is Geckota with 2, and Wolbrook this time brings up the rear. So pretty much a straight swap for both Wolbrook and Geckota. And let's go into a little bit of detail with the movement. So the bottom run of the ladder so far as this list is concerned is Wolbrook, and it uses the Miyota 8315. There are a couple of reasons as to why this is the bottom, but this movement does have some plus points as well. First of all, I will tell you the plus points with this movement. It has hacking, hand winding. It is a relatively old but reliable movement, which is why so many micro brands still use it, and it's relatively cheap to source as well, which means services should be pretty easy. But one of the big draws with this movement is that it has 60 hours of power reserve, so it is last, but it is a reluctant last. Number 2 on the list, or coming in second as we move upwards, is Geckota. Geckota uses the PT 5000 movement, which in itself is a clone of the ETA movements. Now, this watch would be at number 1 in terms of its movement. However, the PT 5000 is still not as tried and tested as some of the other movements that are available out there because it's still relatively new. So as such, it takes a good spot at the number 2 point on this list. But at number 1, the Laurier has to take it. It has the Miyota 9039 no date movement, which is different from the Miyota 8000 series that Wolbrook has because it does have a ghost date, something I didn't mention before. So the Miyota 9039 is a no date movement from Laurier. I think this is a high beat watch that is absolutely fantastic, and it's a great choice for micro brands. So Laurier definitely takes this one. Next on the list, we have Crystal, and at number 1, taking the spot again, is Wolbrook. At number 2, we have Geckota, and at number 3, the last one this time, is Laurier. Now, I don't think this category would be a surprise to anyone. So in the top spot, we have Wolbrook, and it is a lovely piece of double domed sapphire crystal that gives vintage distortions, but with the modern updated of sapphire crystal, which is always a wanted item in a watch, especially at this price point. At number 2, we have the Geckota, and that does have a piece of sapphire crystal. Again, these two both have AR coating on them, but this is a curved boxed sapphire crystal. It is good, and it is a perfectly great piece of equipment to have on a watch. It's just not as good, in my opinion, for a retro reissue as a double domed sapphire, although it is still a very nice glass to have over the dial. And at number 3 is the Laurier, which uses acrylic crystal. Nothing wrong with acrylic crystal. Again, in fact, it is my second favorite crystal to have on a watch after sapphire. It gives it more of a vintage aesthetic, which is what Laurier are going for, but in terms of durability, sapphire always trumps acrylic. Next on the list, we have the case finishing, and this is actually a pretty good category, and it was quite tight between all of them, but I have to give the main points here to Geckota, followed by Laurier and Wolbrook at the rear. So as I said, there's not a huge amount in this one, but I have to say that Geckota does have some of the better finishing on this case. It has a mixture of brushed and polished edges, and it looks quite nice. They've obviously put quite a bit of detail in it. I also like the case shape as well. It's very Formex, but with a whiff of vintage to it as well. Second up, we have Laurier, and again, this is a mixture of brushed and polished finishing. I quite like the angular case design on this one. It looks very much like the 50s divers that it's based on, which is the Blancpain, the Omega Seamaster, and of course the Rolex Submariner as well. Again, very, very well done, the case on here. And even though Wolbrook is the last on this list, I can't say that the finishing on this case is particularly bad at all. It's just simpler, and the simple stuff on here is it has brushed everything, really. Everything on here is brushed. It's very great in terms of its design. It's very sort of circular. I do like this case, but it's just more basic than the other ones. Next on the list is probably a more controversial area. Now, I have split bracelet and clasp into two separate categories, and I will tell you why as we go on. But in first place for bracelet alone, it is Wolbrook, followed by Laurier, and then Geckota. So this time I'm going to start off with the bottom choice, which is Geckota, and it's simply because I'm not a big fan of Jubilee bracelets, which is why this is quite controversial. The bracelet itself, though, isn't bad. I mean, it's comfortable to wear. I'm just not a big fan of the bracelet being a Jubilee on a diving style watch. Screw links, you can get pretty much a perfect fit through the bracelet just because of these screw links. There's very little, if no, taper. I think there's a very slight taper, but not much of it. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a Jubilee bracelet on a dive watch, which I'm not a big fan of, if I'm honest with you. Second place, we have Laurier. This is more of the 3-link oyster style, or, you know, sort of 3-link style bracelet that you usually get. Again, these are screw links as well. Very secure, very good, very angular as well in their design. They are comfortable on wrist, but they don't quite conform as well as Wolbrook's, which is number 1. Now, Wolbrook's has a beads of rice. It's like a beads of rice / Jubilee style bracelet. Again, very, very good construction. The only difference here is that these are push pins, which again, I'm not so worried about, but you can get a pretty good fit because of it. And there is a nice bit of taper on this watch as well. It starts off at 20 and tapers right down at the clasp as well. So yeah, in my opinion, Wolbrook's bracelet is the best out of the 3. Oh dear, it's time for the clasp. And again, in bottom place, we have Geckota. In second place, we have Laurier. And in first place, again, we have Wolbrook. So starting off in first place, Wolbrook's clasp is, I think, one of the best in terms of microbands that I have seen in a while. Yes, there's no diver's extension, but I don't really care that much about them on these types of watches. You've got 5 holes of micro adjust on this watch, milled clasp just like the rest of them, and security pushes. But what I also like about this watch is the design on the clasp as well. It's a mixture of brushing lines, and it's a mixture of sort of brushed and polished, and you have the Wolbrook logo at the bottom as well. I think this clasp is actually really very nice, and it fits with this watch really well. Secondly, you have Laurier. Now, Laurier's clasp is nothing to write home about, but it's not bad either. You've got 3 holes of micro adjust, a Mills clasp, and security pushers. And again, you have the Sergeant's style chevrons on the clasp as well. Not a bad effort from Laurier at all. And then in last place, unfortunately, I have to give it to Geckota. I mean, what were they thinking with this clasp and this watch case? I still think this watch is fabulous, but I think one of the main things that lets it down is the clasp. Yeah, you've got a milled clasp with security pushers and the Geckota sort of stamped in, but this clasp just feels a little cheap, and it feels a little bit out of place to have on a 200-meter diver. Next on the list we have bezels, and I'm not just looking at the fidgetability of the bezel, I'm also looking at the design of the bezel as well. In first place we have a return to form for Geckota, in second place we have Wolbrook, and in last place this time we have Laurier. Now in my review I said that Geckota is the perfect desk diver, but actually I'm going to say it's a bit of a schizophrenic dive watch, because the bezel on this watch is pretty good. I mean, first of all, it's a nice design. It's a resin filled design. There is a loom pip at the 12 o'clock, and instead of having it in the usual line numerals, you've actually got 5, 10, 15, 20 and those sorts of minute tracks all the way around, and it's nice. It's good. I think it has an original look to it, as well as paying homage to designs gone by as well. I like this bezel, and it feels really good in the wrist. It's probably the easiest out of all 3 to twist, and it's the most satisfying out of all 3 to twist as well. In number 2 in number 2 we have Wolbrook. Now this one is a little harder to twist, but it does feel nice in the hand when you do twist it. It's really grippy, and I like the fact that this one is a countdown bezel, which is more in line with how the Skindivers used to be. So again, very nice, very good bezel from Wolbrook. Not quite as good as Geckota, but still pretty good. And then last on this list we have the Laurier. It's by no means a bad bezel. It just feels a little more tinny than the others, and a little more floaty, I'd probably say. It sort of reminds me a little bit of some Seiko bezels, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's very clean, it's very crisp. You've just got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 in numerals, and you've also got the 12 o'clock area there as well. On this watch you don't have any loom on the bezel. On the Wolbrook and on the Geckota, the loom pips are bezeled. Well, there's a loom marker at 12 on Wolbrook which is loomed, and a loom pip on the Geckota one which is loomed as well. So now we're about halfway through, and it's time to look at the loom of the watches themselves. I would say that all of the loom on here are good, if not outstanding. They are good for the price that you pay for them. In first place for the loom here I have Wolbrook. In second place I have Laurier. In bottom I have Geckota. None of the loom is particularly bad. I just think the Wolbrook's one is a little stronger than the others, and also it has a larger surface area as well. But that's what I'm going to say on loom. I'm going to keep that short and sweet. Next on the list is design, and in first place we have Wolbrook, second place Laurier, and last place Geckota. Now this one is probably the most subjective of all of the ones so far, so I do feel a little mean for the one that's in last place. But in last place I have Geckota. Obviously it's a very clear homage to a couple of different vintage reissue style divers, that namely being the Rolex Submariner and the Tudor Black Bay. However, the case is different and the markers are different as well. There's enough individuality about it for you to know this isn't a one-for-one copy or homage. I just think that some of the designs that are on offer are a little better than this one. There's no shade on the Geckota watch though. I still think this is a pretty looking watch. In second place I have Laurier, and there's no real reason as to why this one is second other than I love the look of the distortion that you get from the acrylic crystal. I also like the fact that this is paying homage to certain watches from the 50s and the 60s, namely the Submariner, the Blancpain and the Omega as well. I think the arrows are really good. I like the fact that the dial has the gilt on it as well, and the textures, and I think it's a very simple black dialed watch with a bit of gilt in. I just think it's a really simple and nice design. But first place for me has to go to Wolbrook, and I've made no I can't hide my bias towards this dial, if I'm honest with you. I think the dial is gorgeous. I love the hands. I love the even numerals. Yes, it's got a whiff of Glashütte CQ original about it. However, if you look at the history of Wolbrook as well, which is the only heritage brand in today's list and roundup, it had designs very similar to this one, and some designs that were out and out the same as this one as well. So although this is technically homaging an homage, it is originally homaging itself, if that makes sense. So you can call this a semi-original design, but what I really like about this watch is the dial. It's clean, it's crisp, there's not too much writing on it. It is simple and it looks the bee's knees. Reliability is another area which is quite iffy, and it's quite a difficult one to choose. But in first place I have Laurier, second place Wolbrook, and last place I have Geckota. So the first thing I'm going to talk about with reliability is movements. So although I marked the Wolbrook as being the worst of all the movements, or the least desirable of all the movements, there is no denying that it is one of the most reliable because it's been around so long. People know it, people understand it, people know its track record. And in addition to that, the same company that created it, the Citizen Group, also created the Miyota 9039, which is the top of the list on the Laurier. I think this is probably the most reliable of all of the movements from a big brand, and it is updated for the modern day. And the PT5000, although it is by no means a duffer of a movement, it is a relatively new clone of the ETA, and with that you just have to keep it in mind when you're using it. I mean, I'm not going to say that this watch is going to fall apart, but I'm not going to say that the PT5000 is massively reliable, because I think it's fair to say that we really just don't know yet. Next up on the list is Heritage, and I have Wolbrook, no surprises, in top place, Laurier as number 2, and Geckota in bottom place. So with Heritage, I'm not just talking about heritage of the brand, because obviously Wolbrook wins that one all day long, and it still does on this, but I also mean the heritage of the design too. Now Wolbrook's design is straight out the Skindivers of the 1950s. Wolbrook was around as a brand back then as well, so it's pretty hard not to put Wolbrook as top of this category. However, it was very much touch and go again with Geckota and Laurier. I would say Laurier's one is built with the inspiration and the very clear design history, or design DNA, from the Rolex, from the Blancpain, and from the Omega. So this one has been put in second, but again, the Geckota by no means is a duffer on this one. It's just a shame that in terms of heritage, I think that this design is obviously something that you wouldn't have seen back in a retro reissue, just because of the angular designs of the case. Again, doesn't mean that it's a bad watch at all. It just means that it's a little different from your average heritage divers. So this next one is Versatility, and I'm putting Laurier in top place on this one. Geckota unfortunately goes back to the bottom, and in the middle we have Wolbrook. So really, Versatility means that it's going to look just as good on a beach or in jeans and a t-shirt as it will do in an office setting. And for me, Laurier really does take the cake with this one. It's superbly well made. It would look good in almost every setting that you would put it in, and I think it really is a stunner. Second place you have Wolbrook. The drilled lugs help you remove the bracelet. The bracelet can look quite dressy, but you can also put a good leather band on this watch. You can put NATO straps on this one, or sailcloths as well. There are lots of different straps that you can put on this watch. The only thing that I would say as a caveat, and I'll get onto this later, is that there are lots of different dial colours, and you have to really choose a dial colour that's going to match some of the other tools that you have. But in last place we have the Geckota, and I think the thing that really lets this one down is the bracelet, the Jubilee bracelet being very jingly jangly. The fact that the clasp is only a small holes and micro adjust. This would look great in an office setting or a semi-formal setting. I think if you were to wear this on a beach, it wouldn't look necessarily out of place, but it wouldn't look as rugged and as tool-like and as reliable as the other ones. So unfortunately, Geckota, you're back at the bottom of the list for this one. But can he pull it back with ease of use? Well, no. Fortunately, Geckota remains at the bottom. Laurier is second on this list, and Wolbrook is top of this one with 3. So by ease of use, I mean a couple of things. First of all, how legible is the dial at night? How easy is it for you to use? How tool-like is it, and how easy is it to change straps out and to make it look however you want it to look? So again, Geckota unfortunately is at the bottom of this list. It's Loom, although not bad by any means. It's not as good as the other ones. There are no drilled lugs on this case as well, which means removing the bracelet that I don't think really belongs with this watch is harder to do, and there are no quick release systems either. Laurier has a bit of a middle ground. You don't have quick release, but you do have drilled lugs, which means that you can change this and put it onto a NATO strap or a leather band if you want to. But in first place we have Wolbrook, and when you buy this watch you're actually given the opportunity to have a free strap on it anyway, which means that you do have some versatility straight out the gate. But again, this one has drilled lugs, but its bracelet, the beads of rice bracelet that it has, actually has quick release spring bars as well. So it's incredibly easy for you to change things around and change things up when you need to. Now, I said earlier that I didn't want to have any tie breaks in this list, but this is the one category where I physically cannot do that, which is in water resistance. Both the Laurier and Geckota get a 3 and the Wolbrook gets a 2. Now, I have no doubt that all of these watches would be safe by the side of a pool or in the sea if you were to go swimming with them. At the end of the day, they are dive watches. They all have screw down crowns and screw in case backs, which offer a great level of security. But both Laurier and Geckota have 200 meters of water resistance. Unfortunately, Wolbrook is slightly less than that. It is 150 meters water resistance. However, say it with me, I think they've done that to remain true to the old specifications, because 150 meters was one of the old adages that they used to put on these skin divers. But either way, you have to give the props to both Geckota and Laurier for having at least 200 meters of water resistance in this category. The next category is strap-aholic, and what I mean by that is how easy is it to put it on a different strap and wear it with pride. I'm not talking about how easy it is to remove and put a new strap on it. What I am saying is how easy is it to put on a strap and have it look good no matter what. And I think you won't be surprised, in first place we have Laurier, second place Wolbrook, and in last place we have Geckota. The final bit on this list is variety, and what I mean by variety are the different options that you have on choice when buying this watch, different colorways mainly, and different sizes potentially. So number 1 we have Wolbrook, number 2 is Geckota this time, and last but not least is Laurier with the 1 point. So the variety standpoint is very interesting because a retro reissue stays true to its roots when it has certain colours and it adheres to them and sticks with them. However, variety really comes in more modern pieces and more modern designs, and having variety within options is always something to be interested in. I think that a good homage watch, a good retro reissue, pays homage to the past but still has a foot firmly rooted in the modern day as well. But that is the reason why Laurier is bottom of this final category. Yes, you've got black and gilt. You've also got black and you've got blue, and I believe you have blue and gilt as well. Classic colorways and classic options, no doubt, but if not, a little dull. Second place, you have Geckota, and what I would say with Geckota watches is that you do have quite a lot of options in terms of colorways. As you know, I chose to have the jade green bezel Sea Hunter dive watch, but you've also got a classic blue style diver which is very reminiscent of a Tudor Black Bay 58. You've also got a full black watch, black bezel, that's essentially exactly the same as a Sea Hunter jade green with a black bezel, and you've also got a Pepsi style bezel as well configuration with a black dial, which I think looks pretty good but not as good as the others. They also had a couple of stainless steel bezels which are now sold out, and an orange dial that looked pretty good too. But top of this list has to be Wolbrook again, and its Skindiver. There are so many different varieties, options and colorways for you to go for. As you know before, I went with the forest green or the military green dial with the white loom, or with the BGW9 in it, the green dial as well. You've got a blue dial, you've got a two-tone dial which is both blue two-tone and green two-tone. You've got white dial and stainless steel bezel. You've got a sort of like a they call it a Caledonian green, but it's more of a, you know, sort of like a mint green dial. You've got black dials, both with green indices, white indices and gilt style tones as well. And you've also got all of these options either on rubber straps of different colors or on bracelets, which are either stainless steel fully or two-tone stainless steel with rose gold indices. There's a lot on offer here. They even have on some of their other models orange face dials as well with their Douglas range. So they have a lot of variety within one design. And that's it. That's the end of the head-to-head. So let's have a look at the overall scores and see who is number one and who unfortunately has come in last place. Well, first of all, let's start with last place. And with an overall score of 25 points out of a possible 48, giving it a percentage of 52.08%, is Geckota and the Deep Sea Hunter. I think it is no surprise to anyone this is last on the list. It did score low on a couple of areas. I think potentially a little harshly in some areas where it could easily have drawn, but I had to put the line somewhere, and I had to say, for the money that you're getting, the Geckota watch is a good watch, but it's not quite a great watch. In second place, with a possible score out of a possible score of 48, we have 34 points, and that goes to the Laurier, giving it an overall percentage of 70.83%. The Laurier is a fantastically well made watch. This is the version 3 that I have, not the most up-to-date version 4, but a lot of the design choices are still the same. I really like the bezel. I love the fact that this is military style reissue, that it's inspired by so many of the great skin dive watches from the 50s and 60s. The design is brilliant and on point. The only thing that lets this watch down in some areas is the bracelet is a little bit angular. The clasp is a little basic, although not terrible, and also the acrylic crystal can be a bit of a deal breaker for people. Not ideally for me. It's not a deal breaker for me. Obviously I still bought it, but it can be a deal breaker when making the decisions. So Laurier valiantly fought, 70.83%, not bad out of a total score of 48. Well done, Laurier, second place. And finally, in first place, we have Wolbrook with a total of 39 points out of 48, giving it an overall percentage of 81.25%. Now, what can I say about the Wolbrook that I haven't said in my review and during this head-to-head? I think, first of all, it is the cheapest of all the watches, but I think it packs a hell of a punch. The only thing that lets it down slightly is the fact that the Miyota movement is a little bit older, but you do have the added I guess utility of a 60-hour power reserve, which the other watches don't have. However, that is, in my opinion, one of the only downsides to this watch. I love the dial, I love the bezel, the bracelet is nice, it feels good on wrist. Wolbrook have heritage and history as well. The brand identity in itself has cachet within the industry. The dial itself is easily swap outable in terms of straps, so you can wear this watch in a number of different settings and still feel like it has a good place as well. For me, Wolbrook offers incredible design and some incredible value for money, but I think all of these watches do. So there you have it. Out of all of these watches, technically the highest spec watch that you can get, which is the Geckota, was the lowest scoring on this list. Isn't it a bit mental? It shows how much with watches that not only are specifications important and movements important, but also design and heritage as well. It's so strange how a smaller brand like Wolbrook can release a watch that really speaks to you in more ways than the bigger brands can. And honestly, this Wolbrook I think is a fantastic little watch and a fantastic choice. So if you are interested, I will leave non-affiliated links to Geckota, to Wolbrook and to Laurier in the description below. Have a look. If any of the watches are still in stock, as they are micro brands, they do sell quickly, and you're happy with these watches, feel free to go ahead and purchase them. I will also include some affiliate links below as well to other heritage dive watches that may be of interest to you as well. But everyone, it's been great to do this comparison. If you have any thoughts, comments or ideas, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you all again very soon.